Hey, Pretty Girl Club. Welcome to another episode of the Decentering Men series. If you're new to this channel, I have over 25 videos where I go in depth about the nuances of decentering men and what that really means. So today I want to talk about the declining marriage rates and how marriage is no longer the flex that it once was. So if you're watching this and you're married, this is not supposed to be shady towards you or towards anyone else who is married, but I like to talk about social trends that I see. According to CNBC.com, in the US, marriage has declined by 60% since the 1970s. And I think that a part of why that is because people are realizing that marriage isn't the flex that they thought it was. Marriage doesn't make the man more faithful. It doesn't suddenly turn him into a provider. Not to mention the fact that here on this YouTube channel, I expose the fact that the majority of marriages are 50-50 or hypogamous marriages. That's right, not everybody is going to get the hypergamous marriage of their dreams to a multi-billionaire guy who is so emotionally available, faithful, loyal, attractive, has no kids, lives in your city, prefers you. Here on this channel, I don't like to talk about things from a perspective of always having this romanticized view of marriage. I like to talk about things from reality. So yes, it's a beautiful thing to hope that you can find someone and have a wonderful marriage. But the reality is that marriage rates are declining, and it's because a lot of women are realizing that once they get into these marriages, the validation that they thought they would receive, it is not being received. Why is it that no one talks about the fact that a lot of people get married simply for validation? Let's talk about how a lot of women are required to change their names after marriage. Why are you expected to change your name after marriage to his last name? This is about validation. A lot of times women change their names so that they can tell the world, hey, I belong to this guy now. Hey, just so you know, I'm with this guy. I am no longer Jane Doe. I am now Jane Johnson, and Mr. Johnson is my husband. So oftentimes men will use this to up their own status because all of your accolades that you had before you married that guy, all of those achievements that you had, now he gets to raise his status by his approximation to your achievements. So you're not just Beyonce Knowles, you are now Beyonce Knowles Carter. So now he gets to brag about the fact that, oh yeah, she's a Carter, her children will be Carters, this is who I'm fucking, this is who I am attached to, this is the woman that chose me. And I've noticed that this actually applies to everyday men. A lot of men want to marry these women that have all of these achievements and all of these accolades, not just so they can go 50-50, but they're doing this because it also validates him so that he doesn't feel like as much of a loser. Have you ever noticed that a lot of men pressure women into marriage and childbearing so that that man doesn't feel like a loser? He will say things like, I want to leave a legacy, and that's the reason that he wants kids. Or he feels like the only reason that he has any sort of legacy on this earth is if you birth his children. And the reason that he is saying that is because he knows whoever has his name, he gets to be associated with that clout. And so this is about validation. This is about clout chasing for a lot of guys. Like I said, the marriage does not make him more faithful. It doesn't make him emotionally available. A lot of women who have been in these marriages for 20 and 30 years, they are not married to husbands that are emotionally available. And if you don't believe me, why don't you ask your mother and father? Ask your sister or anybody you know that has been married for 20 and 30 years. Just ask them, what was the hardest part of your marriage? And then watch them go silent, because they know that if they admit to you what the hardest parts of their marriage are, they will be admitting that they've been abused. They will be admitting that they've been neglected. A lot of women who stay married for a really long time are actually neglected. And this is why I think that decentering marriage and decentering children will be a pivotal part in the decentering men journey. I know that not every woman is going to be able to do that. I know that there are some women who feel like their life is not complete without marriage or without children. If that's what you think, this probably isn't the channel for you. But for a lot of people, they wanted to get married because they wanted the societal validation of being able to say that they were married. This channel talks a lot about the concept of privilege stacking. That's a terminology that I coined. It was the best way I could think of to describe it. And it's also a form of social climbing. So privilege stacking is something that these trad wives do. So for example, they want to marry this guy so that she can quit her job, so that she can then go online and flex all of the privileges that she has, like the privilege of having the free time to make cereal from scratch, the privilege of having the free time to spend 2 hours doing her makeup in the morning. So she wants to be able to stack her privileges so that she can hopefully flex those privileges amongst other women and social climb in the presence of other women. I've noticed that a lot of times when women get married, it's so they can impress other women. It's so they can feel like they are the one that got picked, like they are the special ones in the eyes of other women. But now that we have really started to learn about things like mental health, it's really common now to know about things like narcissism and triangulation and PTSD and stuff like that. A lot of us are realizing that most of these marriages, they're either 50-50 or they are emotionally unfulfilling. But I've noticed that a lot of women, they used to feel like they had social power by being married because those women used to be able to go around and give unsolicited advice on how to get a husband like hers. And because we were more ignorant back then, we weren't really questioning who that man was. And that's because we were even more male-centered in previous generations. But now with the decentering men movement and now with women kind of choosing to keep their standards high, now we are smart enough to ask questions like, okay, you've been married to him for 30 years. That's not the flex. What is worth flexing is how your mental health is. How were you treated for those 30 years? Were you going 50-50 for 30 years? So you're telling me that you basically had a 50-50 friends with benefits roommate for 30 years, yet you did not have the freedom of actually living on your own and being able to have autonomy over your own life? That's not the flex that you think it is. But I've noticed that in the past, a lot of people were getting married for romantic reasons. And I'm not saying it's bad to want romance. I'm not saying that romance is bad at all. But a lot of people were sacrificing financially so that they could have romance. They were sacrificing their own personal happiness just so they can try to give off the illusion of having this romance. And I've noticed that a lot of the things that people do that revolve around marriage are all centered around getting validation. For example, as soon as you get engaged, what do? You call all of your friends and family and tell them. You post pictures of your ring on Instagram and on Facebook and stuff, and you start planning a bridal shower and a wedding shower and all that. You plan your engagement party, and you're doing all of that so that you can get the validation. You're doing that because you want people to congratulate you. You want people to celebrate the fact that you got picked by this man for this 50-50 marriage so that you can essentially build him up and be a Barbara the Builder until you get old and then he decides to cheat. But I've noticed that a lot of the marketing that is geared towards women in regards to marriage, it's all centered around validation. So for example, even these companies that talk about like wedding dresses and stuff, like purchasing wedding dresses, it's all about impressing all of your friends and family. It revolves around how beautiful you're going to look in front of everyone, when you're getting chosen by this man and he's professing to the whole world that you're his wife. Meanwhile, there are tons of married men in real life who don't even wear their rings when they're out in public, or they will be at work hitting on unmarried women like myself and like the women on this channel. They'll be at work hitting on other women, but the way they advertise it to you is by getting married. That is like the ultimate form of love. That's the ultimate form of acceptance. That's the ultimate fulfillment. And that is, the biggest sacrifice that a man can make is to marry you. And in reality, not only is that not the biggest sacrifice that a man can make, if anything, marriages often benefit men way more than they benefit the woman. All you have to do is, like I said, look at the women around you who are married. For those of you who come from two-parent homes like myself, and your parents are still married to this day, like myself, look at the dynamics of your own mother and your own father. What sacrifices did your mother make in order to keep that marriage? And are you willing to make those same sacrifices? Are you willing to go 50-50 for the next 80 years of your life just so you can tell people that you have a husband, when we already know the stats about marriage and how the majority of marriages are working class and they're, not rich, and the majority of wives are not stay-at-home housewives? So whenever a woman tells me she's married, I immediately think, okay, she's in a 50-50 marriage. And even those trad wives online, like the women who like to brag about how they have the soft life because their husband pays the bills or whatever, those women are still working, because being on social media and getting millions of views and stuff, you are getting paid for that. So those women, even though the husband might be paying their bills, those women still know, I need to get some income, because once he leaves my ass, I need to be sure that I have the financial stability to move on. But a lot of those trad wives online, they don't acknowledge the women who are married to men right now, and they are stay-at-home housewives or stay-at-home moms, and they don't have a social media following of hundreds of thousands of people. They're not working online and generating their own income. And I guess the way that I see it is, if I'm going to have to generate my own income either way, and if I'm going to have to either work a job or have my own business either way, why do I need to tie myself to a cheating man for the rest of my life? And for those of you who say not all men are cheaters, okay, fine. Let's use another statistic. Let's use the statistic of how the majority of people going to therapy are women. And let's talk about how a lot of men do not have emotional intelligence or a vocabulary to describe their emotions. And so let's talk about that. Do I want to tie myself to a man who is going to be emotionally unavailable for the next 80 years? Do I want to invest my emotions in a man who is most likely not going to be able to reciprocate those emotions for the next 80 years, and go 50-50 with him, and let him look at porn on the side while I'm in the other room washing dishes? Is that what I'm supposed to be envious of? So I think that now that women know the porn statistics, by the way, the statistics on pornography that's actually the main thing that caused me to lose interest in marriage. Once I realized that the majority of men can't even go more than 1 month without engaging in pornography or, engaging with a sex worker in some way. This includes married men. Oh, by the way, not to mention the fact, if you haven't seen my other episodes, 97% of the guys who subscribe to OnlyFans are married men. It's either 97% or somewhere in the 90s. So once you get married, he's most likely going to go ahead and open up a nice OnlyFans account. And while you're over there slaving away over those dishes, or, trying to work so that you can pay your half of the rent, he's over there giving his half of the rent to the OnlyFans girl, or he's giving his extra money to that OnlyFans girl instead of spending it on taking you on date nights or whatever and buying you flowers or pampering you. Nope, he's spending it on a girl who doesn't even know he exists, who has no emotional connection to him whatsoever, and who could care less about him being in her life because she has decentered that man. So you have centered your life around a man who has not centered you. And what a lot of women are starting to realize is that for them, marriage meant emotionally centering your life around each other. And for the man, marriage means she is centering her life around me. So a lot of men, when they get married, they're not going into it with the mindset of, I'm going to center my life around you financially, emotionally, and in all of these other areas, and I'm just going to try to serve you as much as I possibly can. That's not how most husbands are going into these marriages, and we know that because of the OnlyFans statistics. We know that because women on this channel are going into work every single day and being hit on by married men and being flirted with by married men. So the reason that marriage is no longer the flex that it once was is because a lot of women are starting to wake up to the nature of most men. And also, a lot of women are just looking around them and seeing the married couples around them and seeing how much they work to try to protect their image. Most married couples spend more energy protecting their image than they actually spend on fixing the marriage. Have you ever noticed that? They have sayings like, what happens in this marriage stays in this marriage, or don't let everybody get into your business. The reason they're saying that is that's a typical isolation tactic that abusers use, number one. But they're saying that because they know that if you did let people inside of what's going on in your marriage, you know that people would be like, oh my God, why are you with this guy? Oh my God, you guys don't even talk? Wow, he just comes home and plays video games all night and then just looks at porn and goes to bed, and then you're just sleeping by yourself? Wow, he's spending his extra money on OnlyFans girls. Meanwhile, you're the main one contributing to you guys' 401k. But I think that a lot of women are starting to realize that a lot of the reason that we wanted marriage was because we wanted a couple of things. We wanted to feel special and we wanted validation. By the way, there's nothing wrong with either of those things. There's nothing wrong with wanting to feel special. There is nothing wrong with positive, healthy validation. But what a lot of people don't realize is that once the honeymoon is over, that feeling of being special, it starts to fade over time. And don't even get me started on when you get pregnant, when you have kids, or when you age or gain weight and your beauty kind of starts to fade and stuff like that. Then all of that being treated special stuff, it begins to fade. And there's a reason why there is a saying, you guys argue like a married couple. Well, did you know that the average quote unquote healthy couple argues 2 times a week? So if you've been married for 30 years, you are going on an average of 104 arguments per year. So 104 times 30 is 3,120 times arguing. So I'm supposed to be jealous because you've been with a guy that you've argued with over 3,000 times? Another thing that does not make sense to me is the concept of having to change your name after marriage. Why are you changing your name? It's because you want to validate your relationship. So once again, that's another aspect of marriage that is just revolving around societal validation. But now that societal validation is gone because a lot of people realize that most married couples are actually more like roommates. It's more like brother or sister 50-50 roommates who just argue 3,000 times. And now that people care more about things like mental health or, maybe just like living life on their own terms and stuff, it is causing marriage to lose its shine. And also, have you ever noticed how men are the main ones who are arguing up and down that we should get married? So anything that men are heavily fighting for, I'm automatically going to give it a side eye. Because if men are the main ones fighting to keep this institution around or fighting to get women to center marriage, I'm automatically giving the side eye. Because usually the things that men fight for the most tend to harm women the most. But when it comes to the whole name change thing too, like men fighting for women to change their name to his last name, it's because he just wants to kind of put clout on his name by saying, this is my woman or whatever, like I own her, she belongs to me. And oftentimes the men, they also want to put their name on the children because whatever achievements you have now for the rest of your life as his wife, it is now tied to his name, Carter. Whatever accolades you have, anytime someone names you, they're going to be naming him. So that's another reason that people do the whole name change thing. So once again, it's all about validation. And why should I share my accolades and my name with someone who is probably not going to honor me behind closed doors? I'm convinced that a lot of people who have been married for a long time are not as happy as what they try to show the world. And honestly, anytime somebody is going out of their way to brag about how happy they are in their marriage, usually it's the exact opposite because it's like, who are you trying to convince, me or yourself? Speaking of convincing yourself, have you ever noticed that most of the marketing for marriage goes towards women? Most of the socialization towards centering marriage goes towards women. All of these storylines and romance novels and stuff and all these movies are geared towards women. They're not geared towards men. So a lot of women have been socialized to be emotionally and physically monogamous, whereas men have been socialized to be physically non-monogamous and to be emotionally unavailable. Has anyone noticed that people like to pretend that if you're married to a guy that suddenly he's this emotionally available, emotionally intelligent guy? And it's like, no, just because you are married to him and live with him, that doesn't mean that you can sit down and have an hour-long conversation with him. That doesn't mean that he is not keeping secrets from you. So I've noticed that a lot of people in the past, they would stereotype being married as having this man who he can emotionally open up to you and you can open up to him. You guys tell each other everything. And for most marriages, that's not what it is. And that is why 97% of OnlyFans subscribers are married men, because clearly these men are not telling their wives everything. So that's another reason why I feel like marriage is on the decline, because people realize that getting married does not change the nature of a man. It doesn't change his personality. He doesn't suddenly become a good father. He doesn't suddenly become this romantic person. Also, let's talk about the fact that a lot of young boys are trained to be impulsive. Have you ever noticed that impulsive behavior is more acceptable with boys than girls? So for example, we have phrases like boys will be boys, or we say things like, oh, he's just rambunctious, oh, he's just hyper. So we kind of sweep under the rug the fact that a lot of these boys are very impulsive. They kind of destroy things naturally from the time they're children. They will break things. They will like throw stuff. They like to build stuff and then tear it down and then try to build it back up again their way. So a lot of guys from the time they are children, they're not socialized to think about the consequences of their actions. A lot of boys have grown up being nurtured by their mothers, and then I've noticed a lot of girls, they get more disciplined. A lot of girls are socialized to kind of conform to whatever the social norms are. They're taught how to be polite. You know, girls are more focused on having manners and all that stuff, like don't talk out of turn, whereas boys, they are not socialized in the same way. So this causes those boys to grow up into men who do not think about the consequences of their actions. And this is how you get men who are like cheaters and stuff, or men who just marry women that they actually hate. And this is because a lot of men lack foresight. A lot of men, like I said, they do not have the vocabulary to even describe their own emotions. A lot of men are not even aware of their own emotions while they're happening. So this is why a man can say, I love you, and he actually doesn't love you. This is why men can go through whole entire marriages and not be attracted to you, because he doesn't understand why his D isn't getting hard when you guys are in the bedroom. He's not even thinking, wait a minute, maybe I'm not attracted to her. Maybe I never was. Wait a minute, maybe I don't like her anymore because she's fat. Maybe I only got with her because of her body. A lot of men do not take the time to think about all of those things. They just go out and they're very reactionary on average, and they just kind of take whatever comes to them. So this is why all of these women who are kind of desperate for the validation of marriage, these women will put themselves in the position to get picked by these men. So oftentimes they will offer to pay half of his rent. And this is why the man is marrying her, because he's thinking, okay, well, she's offering to pay half my rent. I mean, and I get free sex, and I get a free cook, and I get a free soft landing so that when I try to go cheat and I get rejected, I still have somebody to come back to. So a lot of guys are just living their life in survival mode. A lot of men just use women to help him survive. They use women as their employees. So this is why you will see men like Elon Musk and Jeff Bezos, who they will start off with one wife. That wife will build up his entire company. You know, she'll be his original employee. They will specifically target women who are lawyers or doctors, like these really intelligent women. They will specifically target you so that you can help build him up into the man he's always wanted to be. And then he takes his newfound wealth and status that you helped him to build, and then he leaves you because now you're 40 something or 50 something. Maybe you've gotten a little bit out of shape. Maybe you're paying a little bit too much attention to the kids and you're not giving him the attention that he feels he deserves now. So a lot of men get into marriages because they were poor and they just wanted to have a two-income household. So a lot of people get married to escape poverty. That's really what it is. So that man only married that woman so that he can escape poverty, because now he's got a two-income household. So now he gets to upgrade his lifestyle. Now, you know, he could only afford a $900 apartment before, but now that he's got double the income because of her, now he gets to upgrade his lifestyle and he can afford a $1,500 apartment now. And another reason why I think that marriage is not the flex that it once was is the concept of a joint bank account. So oftentimes 50-50 couples will create a joint bank account. So all of your paycheck is going into that account or whatever, or you're kind of putting money into that pot. He's putting money into the pot. So all of these vacations and stuff that these married couples go on, it's like, sis, you paid for that vacation. Like, that came from your last 5 paychecks. That's the only reason that you went to Disneyland. He is not protecting and providing. It's not like he is taking you on a vacation like these other women who are unmarried and have separate finances. No, you are paying for your own lifestyle, which means you kind of like didn't really need that guy or whatever, or you could have been treated better and had it easier if you would have just not been married. And like, let's say some other guy just decides to pay for you. So it's like, you have a joint bank account. So all of your Christmas presents, you partially paid for them yourself. All of your vacations you're going on, you basically paid for that yourself. The house you live in, you basically paid for that yourself. So it's not like you're actually being protected and provided for. And oftentimes, if that man spends money on other miscellaneous things that you wouldn't have approved of, such as some new Yeezys or a new video game or a couple of OnlyFans subscriptions or a premium subscription to some porn website or something, or on strippers, well, that's where part of your money is going, from that joint bank account. Or he is siphoning off money on the side so that he can, like, you know, spend money on whatever he wants. I've even heard of some guys taking money out of ATMs and taking it out in cash so that they can go spend it on other women, and, you know, it's not traceable. Another thing that I've noticed is the only people who are very pro-marriage are people who have either never been married or they've never been divorced. So if the main people promoting marriage are in that marriage or they are just aspiring to it, that is not an objective enough way to convince me, because it's like, no, if you're going to convince me to do something, I need people from all different backgrounds to be kind of like talking about the pros and cons of it, not only the people who are participating in that behavior who are like, oh yeah, you should get married so you can be like me. Oh, why should I get married? Oh, because I want to get married. That's not a good enough reason. Just because somebody else wants to get married, that doesn't mean that I have to have that same desire. Just because you're married doesn't mean that I have to want to get married too. So that's another red flag that I've noticed when it comes to marriage. It's only married people or people who aspire to be married who are actually promoting the marriage. It's not very common for women to get divorced and then remarried and then divorced and then remarried and divorced and remarried. No, for the most part, a lot of women who are like widows or women who go through divorces, a lot of those women are okay with never being married again because they realize that their life is actually happier when they don't have this guy holding them back. Not to mention the fact that when you are married, another person has a say in how you live your life. So whatever way you want to swing it, I don't care if you're married and you want to say, well, I get to do what I want. No, you technically don't, because your husband is affected by your decisions. So for me personally, I like the freedom of not having to ask anybody for permission or, ask a man for an allowance for the hypergamous married women who are, you don't really have your own income, or maybe you have your own income, but you want to spend his money. I don't want to have to ask for an allowance and stuff like that. And it's like, I can only spend as much money as he allows me to spend. I have to make sure to please him in the bedroom or make sure to kind of like be good and be on my P's and Q's so that he can give me my allowance this Friday. I personally do not like that power dynamic. And I've noticed that for a lot of men, the only way that they respect you is with money. And so this is why a lot of women choose to go 50-50, which I also don't support, because it's like, if I have to pay half of your bills in order for you to respect me, I shouldn't even waste my time being married to you at all. Another thing that a lot of people don't talk about when it comes to marriage is a lot of men are jealous of women, and this includes married men. Just because a guy is married to you doesn't mean that it's impossible for him to be jealous of you. I've noticed that a lot of husbands, they get jealous of their wives' careers, they get jealous of their wives when they're staying at home, because the man feels like, hey, it's not fair that I'm having to go to work and like suffer basically and be yelled at by my boss, and then I come home and you just get to be living the soft life. Most men will actually resent and be jealous of their own wives because they're mad that their wife gets to live her dreams. Something else that a lot of people don't talk about is that for a lot of men, the reason they get married is not to help you achieve your dreams. It's to help him achieve his. And usually men get married because they want status. They want to be able to brag in front of other men that, hey, I got Beyonce to marry me. Hey, I got so-and-so to marry me. Oh yeah, my girlfriend, she used to be this big doctor, or she used to be this lawyer or this supermodel, but now I got her to settle down and submit to me. So for a lot of guys, it's more so about feeling like they conquered something and feeling like they accomplished and achieved something. And I've also noticed the same dynamic with women as well. A lot of women like to say, oh, my husband, he's this big 6-figure man and he has all of this money. And women will try to use their husband's money to flex on other women as if other women should be jealous. Like, oh wow, I got to submit to her because she married a man with money. And oh wow, I should listen to her advice now. So I've noticed that women do the same behavior as well, where they are trying to social climb amongst other women and they're hoping that marriage will help them to social climb. But I'm not jealous of marriage. I don't put marriage on a pedestal like how I used to. I don't want Beyonce's marriage. I'm just using her as an example, but it's like, I don't want to be in a relationship where I have to hide from everybody what's actually going on. Another thing that people seem to forget is that marriage is forever, or at least the idea is that it's supposed to last forever, or it's supposed to last long term. But going back to the whole men not being emotionally intelligent or men not having a lot of awareness of their emotions, you know what that means? That means that you will inevitably have to deal with one or more of your husband's mental illnesses. So guess what? When he doesn't get that promotion, he's going to fall into a depression. And who has to deal with the side effects of that? Not us, you. You're the one who has to live with a depressed man. A lot of these women are living with men who are, bipolar, schizophrenic. They have all of these different mental illnesses. You guys saw the series on Who the F Did I Marry? I know that that's more of an extreme example, but a lot of men are actually more prone to having unresolved mental illnesses. And so if you are spending your life with a man, chances are at some point you're going to have to deal with him when he is depressed. And there's nothing worse than being with a man who is depressed. There's nothing worse than trying to live your best life or living your soft life or being happy and whatever, and you are sleeping next to a man who is very angry, very resentful, very bitter. That's not the soft life. And the bad part is that you cannot fix his mental illness. So a lot of women will end up in the position of kind of like being a free therapist for this man, but a lot of men look down on their wives. They look down on you because you're a woman and because, he's providing for you, you're submitting to him. So why should he take his emotional advice from you? This is the attitude of a lot of men. Another thing that a lot of married women don't talk about is the fear of abandonment, the fear of aging, the fear of him no longer wanting you and stuff like that. And a lot of women would rather stay in unhappy marriages than deal with the embarrassment of being divorced. And a part of the reason why women are embarrassed with being divorced is because women are usually the ones who are the most happy and excited. If you spent all that time being happy and excited to get married, if you went around promoting that guy, my man, my man, my man, and telling everybody how amazing he is and talking about how he's a protector and provider, and you spent all of these years kind of hiding all of the negative aspects of your marriage, and then suddenly you get a divorce, well, now you're going to have to deal with all of the questions from friends and family or people on social media like, oh, wow, what happened? I thought you guys were so happy. And so for a lot of women, they cannot handle that scrutiny and that embarrassment. And so they choose to suffer in silence. And the way that they cope with their own suffering is they will try to social climb amongst women and make it as if they are somehow higher than you because they're married and you're not married. Also, am I the only one that notices how a lot of married people like to infiltrate single spaces? And it's like, wait a minute, but you're married and you're happy. So why can't you just be married and happy? Why do you have to come over here and try to police who other people are dating? Like all these married men who try to come onto my YouTube channel talking about, my talking points or arguing back and forth and trying to make videos and stuff. It's like, wait a minute, but you're married and happy. Why do you care about who we are dating? Like you already have a woman, right? So if you're so happy in your marriage and you're so enamored with the woman that you have right now, why are you worried about who other women are dating or sleeping with? I've also noticed a similar dynamic with married women. Like once a woman gets married, she wants to try to tell unmarried women all of this advice on dating and stuff. But the way that I look at it is if I wouldn't trade lives with you, I'm not taking your advice. So if I wouldn't trade finances with you, don't give me financial advice because I'm not going to listen. If I wouldn't trade relationships with you, I don't want your relationship advice. If I wouldn't trade bodies with you, I don't want your fitness advice. That's the way that I like to look at it. So why would I take the advice of a random woman on the internet or something just because she says she's married or because he says that he's married? Why would I take these random people's advice when I don't even know the details of what's going on? And if there is a rule that you can't tell others what's happening in your relationship in order to sustain that relationship, that is a huge red flag. If the survival of your marriage is contingent upon you isolating yourself socially and not telling anybody about any of your relationship problems for the rest of your life, that is a gigantic red flag. And also, if somebody has to use death in order to scare me into a marriage, you're going to die alone. That's another red flag, and that shows me that, if anything, I'd rather die alone than die inside, because if you have to be that extreme with the threats to try to convince people to get in on this type of relationship, that means that you're super desperate. Another thing that I have noticed is that just because a man is married, it doesn't take away his craving for external validation. So how are you going to deal with his desire for external validation when you have centered your life around him, you've moved in with him, you're paying 50% of his bills, you have given up your career so that you can birth his children and raise them, and then to have to deal with the emotional devastation of him still seeking validation from women at his job. He is still seeking sexual validation from the waitress. He is still seeking validation from your sister, flirting with your cousins, flirting with your friends, talking about some actress or some stripper or some woman at the mall. A lot of women who are married have had to live their lives in a tolerable level of permanent unhappiness. That was one of the most life-changing sentences I've ever heard, because you do. You have to tolerate a permanent level of unhappiness in one or more areas if you get married. You know why? because there's no such thing as a perfect human being. So guess what? Whatever his character flaws are right now, he's most likely not going to change. He's just going to pretend like he is. Then he's going to do the same actions over and over. So whatever flaws that he has in his character, you now have to deal with the permanent unhappiness of dealing with those flaws for the rest of your life or for as long as you're married. Not to mention the fact that people don't talk about how divorce costs money. It costs money to file the documents or to get somebody to file them for you. It costs money to get things notarized and stuff, or to pay a lawyer's retainer if you have to deal with that. It costs money to move out. I would assume that you would move away from whatever city he is living in. You probably wouldn't want to live in the same neighborhood as him. So usually the farther you're moving, kind of the more expensive it can be sometimes, depending on where you live. So divorce also costs money, and that's something that a lot of people don't think about. But also, the reason why post-wedding depression is a thing is because for a lot of women, the whole process of having a man propose to you, showing your ring online, having the engagement party and all that, having your bridal shower, your bachelorette, getting the dress, and then getting all of the wedding gifts and getting your makeup done and stuff, all of that is kind of like a temporary ego boost. You've got all of this spotlight on you, all of this attention on you. You're getting all of these positive compliments and stuff like, oh, congratulations, you're so lucky. Oh, wow, you look so beautiful. And so once that spotlight is off of you, you no longer have anything to validate you. You no longer have anything to fill your time because you don't realize that on a subconscious level, you thought that a marriage would somehow bring kind of this fulfillment. You thought that your life was incomplete without a marriage and kids or whatever. So once you achieve those things, or once you check the box, you realize that you have no other boxes to check. And this is where you get the married men who start seeking OnlyFans girls, or they start coming on my YouTube channel, or, you get the women who have the post-wedding depression. It's because they realized, wait, I'm still not fulfilled. And so that is probably the biggest tolerable level of permanent unhappiness that I can think of. It's once you do all of that and then you finally realize, wait, this didn't make me as happy as I thought that it would. And so I actually believe that a lot of women who are married and they've been married for a long time, I actually believe that a lot of those women have a life that is filled with regret, or they at least have a life that is filled with a tolerable level of permanent unhappiness. Hence the arguing 2 times a week. Hence the phrase, you argue like a married couple. And also, that would line up with the whole statistic of unmarried, child-free women being the happiest, whereas the men who are married are the happiest because, you've got, I would be happy too if I had a personal chef, if I had a personal assistant, a free employee. Yeah. So, of course, the men are going to be happy in the marriage because they've got a free employee, free sex worker, free maid, free stepmommy, a free womb for their children. They've got a shoulder to cry on. He's got so many things in the presence of a woman. And I've noticed that what a lot of guys do, though, is they tend to devalue what women have to offer. So they tend to devalue you, especially if you're not bringing money to the table, because men tend to not value anything other than money and sex. This is why men ask, what do you bring to the table? Because he wants you to say money and or sex. And if he says, what do you bring to the table besides sex? He wants you to say money, because for a lot of men, that's all they value. So all of the times where you allowed him to cry on your shoulder, that's not valuable. All of those times that you sacrifice your dreams to achieve his, that's not valuable. All of the times that you picked up his dirty dishes or cleaned his underwear, that's not valuable. You know how I know? Because these men will sometimes be so disrespectful to the point where they will literally be in the next room DMing another woman or Facebooking another woman, or, paying $65 to have a sex worker come over later that night. And by the way, for those of you who don't know, those are some of the prices for some sex workers. For the cheap ones, you only have to pay, he only has to pay anywhere from $25 to about $150, depending on what service he wants done. And so that right there is proof that that man did not value the woman's contribution. He didn't value the fact that she risked her life to have his children. But I noticed that the thing that gets women sucked into wanting marriage is the validation. So feeling like the fact that she's a wife makes her better than the people who are not wives. Meanwhile, her husband is over here still hitting on the women who are not his wife. It is the validation of feeling like I'm the wife, you're just the baby mama or the sex worker, not realizing that her own husband engages with sex workers every night when he goes on Pornhub. Or, her own husband probably had some other baby mamas, or he does have a baby mama that she doesn't know about. So oftentimes women just get sucked in by the validation part of the marriage. But another thing that women don't realize is that marriage in and of itself is actually very time consuming. So have you ever noticed that behind every successful man is a woman who helped him get there, and behind every failed woman is a man who helped her get there? So oftentimes women will give up their dreams, they will fall off track on their goals, they will fall off track on their routines, and it's all because they are investing so much time and energy into maintaining the health of this marriage. Because if you want a healthy relationship, you have to invest time in it. You have to spend quality time with the person, kind of ask them how they're feeling, maybe do some special gestures for each other and stuff, getting each other flowers, whatever, I don't know, taking each other out, doing whatever it is that makes your relationship feel good. But a lot of women end up depressed when they're married because their sense of purpose has been kind of like either paused or it's been completely erased, because a lot of women have the tendency to lose ourselves in relationships. And this is because we've been socialized to be nurturing and to be self-sacrificing. So a lot of women will give up on getting her master's, will be like, oh, well, I already married a rich man. Now he's a multimillionaire. I don't need to spend the next 8 years trying to go to law school. But another reason that a lot of women end up getting depressed after marriage is because she didn't realize that she has no more milestones that she wants to achieve after marriage. She viewed marriage as kind of like the ultimate milestone or like the last stop. And so afterwards, that woman realizes, hey, I'll never be celebrated for anything again for the rest of my life. And this is why women start to cope by having children. So they will hope that, okay, so my marriage sucked, or like the excitement from the marriage is gone. Maybe if I become a mom, then I will be able to have that feeling of joy again, because, I get to have a baby shower, all the attention's on me, all the attention is on my baby, and I have something to occupy my time. So a lot of women who they don't have anything to occupy their time anymore, or they feel sad and have a sense of, feeling like they'll never be noticed again. That actually is a very common phenomenon amongst women, especially the women who were not very confident in the first place, or maybe these are women who they didn't achieve their dreams before they were married. So let's say you got married very young, or you got married when you were like in the middle of going to college, but then you dropped out or something. For a lot of women, they feel like marriage is a vehicle to success, or they feel like their marriage is going to somehow catapult them and help them to social climb. And sometimes it might be. I'm not saying that it can't be, but for most women, it's not. So for a lot of women, after they're married, they realize that they will never be noticed again. And especially if they are married to a guy who, once he kind of did the work, he stops investing. Has anyone else noticed that? A lot of times guys will make all of their initial investment in a woman up front. So he will go out of his way to impress you in the beginning. He will take you on all the dates. And then gradually over time, the relationship will become more and more 50-50 until it's unbalanced. And then the woman is kind of giving the most, and then the man is giving the least. So for a lot of men, they are willing to pursue you all the way up until the point of marriage and up until the point of you having babies for them, because then they know, like, okay, I got her locked in now, so now I don't have to get her flowers anymore because she's here. Like, she's not going to leave me. So for a lot of women, especially if you are a stay-at-home wife or stay-at-home mother and stuff, a lot of those women, they end up going through life being invisible, because you're invisible to your husband and he's the only person you really interact with, because your whole life is literally revolving around him and the kids and taking care of them and stuff. And so a lot of women will have that post-marriage depression because they realize that they don't have a sense of purpose. They don't have anything that is like super fulfilling to them. And they are living a life that is actually boring. So they're not investing money in like traveling and stuff. They don't have things to look forward to. They don't have places to go and people to see because they're just trapped in the house 24/7. And this is part of the reason why in the 1950s, during like the popular housewife era, a lot of those women were on antidepressants and stuff like that. And that's very common actually amongst housewives and stay-at-home mothers, because a lot of these women, they have lost their sense of purpose after they end up getting married. And then they also realize that they're going to be living in a tolerable level of permanent unhappiness because they will recognize the man's character flaws, or they will recognize the fact that he's not emotionally available, or he's not trying to help her to feel better. And also, if you don't believe me, look at your own life, because I know that for me, any time where I was the most depressed and the most mentally unhealthy, it was usually when I was in a relationship. It was usually when I was with someone, or when I was in love with someone, or, very serious, like in a very serious relationship. Those were the times that I was the most sad or the most triggered. And then look back on your life when you were the happiest. Why were you the happiest? I know that for me, when I think about the happiest times in my life, it was always a time when I was living by myself. So whether I had a boyfriend or not, I was living by myself and my money was my money. The times when I was the happiest, I did not feel responsible for any other people. But anytime you start throwing in, I'm responsible for myself and my husband, or I'm responsible for myself, husband, children, all these family members and stuff, anytime I have caregiver fatigue, that is when I get triggered for depression. By the way, caregiver fatigue is a real thing. That is for people who have spent all of these hours and years caring for a person, and then they don't have time to care for themselves. And so a lot of these women who have been in marriages for 30 years, even though they're lying to you and saying, oh, I'm so happy, I'm so glad that I was able to do this, they're only saying that because it's all they've ever known. They've only ever been married for the past 30 years. They haven't been married and then divorced or single or whatever, or had a lot of time to live on their own, so they don't know anything else. But a lot of these women who have been married for decades, they have caregiver fatigue because they are caring for themselves, or they're caring for the children, the husband, and they are often neglecting themselves. And this is why you see a lot of older women who have been married, and about 5 or 10 years into the marriage, that man is looking refreshed. He's looking healthy because she's been cooking him all of these healthy meals. His blood pressure is under control. His cholesterol is under control. His beer belly is going down. Meanwhile, she's over here looking like somebody's auntie, looking all stressed and tired, bags under her eyes, her face is swollen, she's gained a whole bunch of weight because she can't spend 2 hours in the gym anymore. You can forget about being an Instagram baddie. No, she can't spend 2 and 3 hours in the gym, or spend all of this time meal prepping for herself, spending $500 a month shopping at Whole Foods and Trader Joe's. No. So for a lot of women, their marriages revolve around nurturing the husband and, nurturing the child. And I'm not saying that that's a bad thing, but oftentimes women end up in a tolerable level of permanent unhappiness because they have spent their entire life focusing on others. And this is why these same married women want to come and shame women who are unmarried and call them hoes and bitches and stuff. And they're very rude and very hateful towards those women, because when you are unmarried and, you're single, you're child free, and you're living your best life, you are triggering who that person could have been. So that person thinks about that lady who's been married. She's thinking, oh shit, I could have spent the last 30 years starting my own business, or becoming, I don't know, some sort of influencer, starting a coffee shop. I could have spent my time becoming a lawyer and stuff. So then when she sees you doing it, you remind her of all the time she's lost. And so this is why I've seen a lot of married women who are unhappily married. They will be very triggered and jealous of women who are unmarried and living their best lives. Also, when it comes to the validation thing, if you're a woman who lives a part of your life based on pretty privilege, let's say you're used to getting a lot of stares and getting a lot of free drinks or whatever, a lot of that goes away once you are married and walking around with the wedding ring on, because I would hope that if you truly love your husband, I'd hope that if you're married, obviously, I would hope that there's some sort of love involved and, that you guys are faithful and loyal. So if you're walking around with your husband all the time, or you're wearing your wedding ring and stuff, any decent guy who is not a serial cheater, he is not going to flirt with you anymore. So he's not going to give you those free drinks anymore. You're not going to get flued out and all that stuff like how you used to. You're not going to get the same type of treatment. Because, for example, let's say you're married to a guy and he is emotionally unavailable, so he's neglecting you. Anytime that a man has been with a woman for a long time, he starts to get used to her beauty. So he's not fangirling as much over your beauty anymore. And so for a lot of married women, if you had pretty privilege, you're used to people fangirling over your beauty all the time and treating you very special. So to go from being treated special by society to suddenly being ignored and neglected by a man who has all these millions, it's going to be a really big shift in your identity. By the way, I'm not shaming you for whichever side you prefer. If you prefer marriage, fine. If you prefer non-marriage, fine. There's no shame, there's no wrong answer. But for a lot of women, that is another shift that she has to face in her identity. Realizing that, I'm married now, and so he just views me as his wife. Like, he's seen me just walking around with my pajamas and my bonnet on. Meanwhile, when you walk into a bar, you're all done up. Like, all of those people, they've never seen you at your worst and stuff. They don't see you when you've gained 50 pounds and like you're trying to lose weight, like how your husband does. So for some women, if they lived a lot of their lives based on that pretty privilege or based on their personal magnetism that comes from their beauty, and then they can no longer use their beauty magnetism for their husband because, he's used to it now. So you can't really bat your eyelashes the same way. And then he reacts how he used to act. For a lot of women, that is going to be another transition that she will have to go through as well. So this is another reason why I see a lot of women who are married, they get mad at pretty women who are unmarried because they see how much attention she's getting. And meanwhile, that woman is attention starved at home. One thing I've noticed is that a lot of married women are very, they're attention starved. They are compliment starved. A lot of married women are actually very emotionally neglected, even if the guy is rich. And also, why are we basing our whole lives off of finding a rich guy? Like, that's something that is very rare. I'm not saying you can't do it, and I'm not saying you shouldn't have hope, but I personally feel like you should not center your life around something that has such a low chance of happening. I view that the same way as trying to be a rapper when you're 45 years old. It's like, I'm not saying you can't do it. It's not impossible, but are you sure you want to like center your whole life around it? But for a lot of people though, especially if you are pretty privileged, if you have pretty privilege, you are used to getting a lot of attention. And so if you go from getting all of this attention, all of these followers and stuff, all of these likes, all of these free drinks, even if you're not on social media, you're used to walking down the street, people say hello to you, people are trying to talk to you and stuff, to suddenly going to, you're only in the house all the time. You don't even dress up anymore because you hardly leave the house. You don't have a job, so you don't work outside of the home. You're only kind of trapped in the kitchen the whole time. You're just walking around in your pajamas, mopping floors and stuff. So you're kind of isolated from all of that external validation. By the way, I am not shaming anyone. Validation in and of itself is not bad. But I will say that if you are a particularly pretty privileged woman to the point where you have made money off of pretty privilege, or you didn't realize how much of your life was based on pretty privilege and based on a lot of the attention that you were getting, like all of those perks and stuff, and kind of interacting with the world around you, to go from interacting with the world and kind of being treated as this princess in your everyday life to suddenly being treated as a peasant in your own home, yes, that is going to be a very difficult transition for a lot of women. So this is why I'm not surprised, especially if the woman is pretty and stuff and smart and, kind of like extroverted or has a really good personality. She's used to socializing and interacting with the world. I'm not surprised when those types of women get divorced because it's like, well, yeah, you can't just take a woman who's like kind of this free bird and then put her in a cage and expect her to thrive. So what I've noticed is that for a lot of women who kind of thrive off of, I don't know, maybe you thrive off of positive attention, you thrive off of being able to be free, you thrive off of your creativity and doing stuff outside of the home. So not just domestic duties, but doing stuff outside of the house. To go from doing your passions to suddenly being trapped in a house with this guy, you don't have any friends anymore. Because that's another thing people don't talk about. When you get married and have babies, your friendships start to decline because, you don't have time anymore. The average woman is not rich, so she can't afford to have a 24/7 full-time live-in nanny. And the ones who do afford that will usually get cheated on when it comes to their husbands being with the nanny. But a lot of women who are married and, they make the transition from being this social butterfly. That's a better way to describe it. You were a social butterfly and now you become kind of like how Cinderella was in the beginning of the movie where she's just sweeping and cooking and cleaning for everybody else. Yes, that's going to be a hard transition for a lot of women. So if you are passionate about cooking and cleaning and all that and you really love doing that, then by all means, you should do that. But for most people, most women don't find their ultimate fulfillment by cooking and cleaning for a man or by cooking and cleaning for children and stuff. Most women don't find their ultimate fulfillment that way. I do believe that every woman has a desire to be recognized, to be validated, and to contribute something special to this world. And I will never shame you for that. That's totally normal. So what a lot of people don't realize, though, is that once you get married, your husband now has a say on what you get to do with your time. So no, you can't go out to that influencer event and stay out until 11 p.m. because you have to come home and take care of the kids. No, you cannot go for that promotion and start working an hour away from where we live because now you won't have time to be a stay-at-home mom and take care of the kids. No, you cannot do modeling anymore because now there are going to be other men looking at you, and I don't want you to do that. You're a mom now. You're my wife now. So no, you can't get paid off of doing bikini modeling like how you used to. No, you know what? I don't want my wife working in a bar. You need to stop working in the bar and just come be at home, be a stay-at-home mom. No, I don't want you interacting with a bunch of drunk men and stuff. So just be a stay-at-home mom and a stay-at-home wife. But for the women who liked being in that bar, or they liked being a bikini model, or just having the freedom to do what they want, those examples are kind of extreme, but it's just all I could think of right now. But for the women who liked having their freedom before, it's also going to be a very tough transition and usually a negative transition that leads to depression because you go from having your own identity to having a merged identity with this man. Literally, you're changing your name to share his name, so you're changing your whole identity. Even in Christianity, they say it's two becoming one. So you're becoming one with this guy, which I think is very mentally unhealthy. That's not, there is no research to show that merging your identity with another person is going to be mentally healthy. Just saying. And for all the people that say, oh, you're just trying to be a strong, independent woman. Well, I'd rather be independent than codependent. And then a lot of guys will say, oh, well, women need to just get off social media. You're living your life based on Instagram. You're just trying to follow what other women are doing. And I'm not saying that that's not the case, but the reason women are on social media is because women like to have a sense of community. Women on average are much better at creating communities than men. And so when you go from having your own community, you have your girlfriends, you have your sisters, your cousins, whatever, and you go from that to suddenly having just this man, just your husband, well, men on average are not good at creating a sense of community. So oftentimes women will find themselves being very socially isolated once they get into these marriages. And we all know that social isolation leads to depression. It leads to a whole host of mental illnesses. But a lot of men, they've been socially isolated since they were like 15 years old. So they're just high-functioning depressed men in a lot of cases. But for a woman who truly was not depressed and you haven't lived your life like that, yeah, to make that transition from you're kind of this social butterfly having fun to suddenly you have to be a wife and mom cooking and cleaning, for a lot of women that is going to be a tough transition. And notice how a lot of the people who promote being a trad wife, usually these women are still young and very pretty. I don't see old, fat, disabled, unattractive women who are able to still be stay-at-home trad wives. I've never seen any woman online going viral because she's been a trad wife for the last 50 years and she loved every minute of it. So I believe that being a trad wife and doing all that and hypergamous trad wives, that kind of lifestyle only lasts for so long in most cases. And the happiness and fulfillment you get from that can only last for so long. The validation that you're going to get from that is only going to be temporary for the most part, because when you see that your single friends or your unmarried friends who are able to go on these girls' trips and do whatever they want, they've started their own multi-million-dollar business, and you are still at home cooking and cleaning as the free employee of the man who started the multi-million-dollar business, yeah, you're going to feel some type of way. But another thing that I've noticed is that the average man's quality of life is nowhere near the average woman's quality of life. So for a lot of women, when they transition into a marriage, their quality of life inevitably goes down. So for example, maybe when you were single and unmarried, you used to go to the park once a week and read for like 2 hours. Maybe you used to spend all of your money at Trader Joe's and Whole Foods. Maybe you used to wake up at 5 a.m. and make yourself a fruit smoothie. But now you can't do those little things that used to make you happy because your husband is like, I don't want to hear that blender. It's too loud. I don't feel like going to the park. It's hot outside. You can't go spend time at the park because you have to watch the baby. So as your responsibilities change, for some women, they don't realize what they're getting into. And to be honest, this is something that you should think about before you get into a marriage. That's part of why I have this series. But I understand that not everybody does that. We all make mistakes, whatever. But for a lot of women, their quality of life actually goes down after getting married because maybe you used to live in a house that was beautifully decorated. You loved it, you had your own garden, and now you are married. So you have to move in with this guy and you're going to have 50% masculine decorations that you hate. You have to look at those deer antlers on the wall, or you have to look at his band posters and stuff, or maybe you don't quite like it as much. And so for some women, the lifestyle transition is not a good one. And so that's another reason why I feel like marriage isn't the flex that people try to say it is, because it's like, no, I don't want to live in a house where it's like 50% of my decorations are ugly, or I have to spend all of this time trying to ask my husband to do the same task over and over again, or I have to try to beg for his allowance and all this stuff. But anyway, what do you ladies think? Do you think that marriage is not as much of a flex as it once was? Have you ever looked at your friends and family? And if so, would you trade lives with them? Would you trade relationships with them? Would you marry a man like your dad or your brother? Would you trade lives with your aunties or your grandmother who was married for 30 and 40 years? What do you think? Let me know in the comment section and I'll talk to you next time. Stay pretty, ladies.